أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذا زلزلت الأرض زلزالها وأخرجت الأرض أثقالها وقال الإنسان ما لها يومئذ تحدث أخبارها بأن ربك أوحى لها يومئذ يصدر الناس أشتاتا ليروا أعمالهم فمن يعمل مثقال ذرة خيرا يره ومن يعمل مثقال ذرة شرا يره رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن استنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين اللهم اجعلنا منهم ومن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر آمين يا رب العالمين اللهم نور قلوبنا بنور القرآن يا أرحم الراحمين السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته Inshallah ta'ala, today we're going to be engaged in a study of Surah Al-Zilzal. This is the surah that follows Surah Al-Bayyinah, surah number 99. And in this surah, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to deal with the subject matter primarily of the last day. Before we begin, just something about how Allah Azza wa Jal approaches this topic in this surah. The people who denied the hereafter basically had three criticisms, three problems with believing in the concept of an afterlife. Their first problem was, how could this sky, this earth, this incredibly stable, element of our life, how could this ever be collapsed? How could this ever come to an end? How could this sky ever crack? How could this earth ever be stretched and lose, this stability that we've seen it have our entire lives and the lives of our ancestors? How will this ever be taken away? So this was too grand of a thought for them to even fathom that this world would come to an end. That's the first problem they had. The second problem they had was, how could there be any record of every single thing that every single person has done? What kind of record could this be? That nothing goes unchecked, nothing gets unwarranted, everything is being witnessed, everything's being watched, and it's being recorded, and it's going to be brought out, nothing will remain, no stone unturned, no deed overlooked, no crime unwatched. So this was the second problem they had. The third problem they had was, even if it did happen, even if we're to assume that the world will come to an end, and all of our deeds will be counted and brought forth and they were being watched, even if that happened, well, we've been worshipping these entities who are supposed to be in good connection with Allah. So even if we go to Allah with these, our bad deeds, these entities that we have been worshipping, they're going to make a case for us. They're going to be shufa'a. They're going to stand in the way and say, Allah, this one's with me. And sort of make a case for them. Which is a good insight, by the way, into the psychology of shirk. People don't do shirk because they deny necessarily that Allah is one. It is because they want somebody in between who can deal with their problems and present them to Allah. This is the idea of, for example, if you have, I don't know if this happens much in the United States, but you have somebody who's a boss, and you have a worker, and in between you have a manager. Right? You've got the boss, you've got the worker, but in between the two you've got the manager. But if the manager is your uncle, right? The manager is your older brother, the manager is your father, that's a relative. You as a worker, you start slacking off. Because you say, look, I don't have to answer to the boss, who does? The manager does. He'll deal with it. Since he knows me and he likes me, he's going to make a case for me. That's basically the idea of shirk. Somebody else will carry my sins. I just need to make that middleman happy. I need to have a connection with that middleman. So long as he's happy, he'll deal with the rest. It's not my problem. And this, putting someone in between ourselves and Allah Azza wa Jal, this is exactly what Islam came to destroy and shatter. Even within the Muslim community sometimes, this psychology, if shirk doesn't exist in its blatant forms, sometimes the psychology of it exists in the mind of the Muslim. So for instance, we'll put people in between ourselves and Allah Azza wa Jalla and say to them, why don't you make dua to Allah and then it'll be accepted, not me. Why don't I give you money and give this and this and this, etc. We put someone in the middle and they'll deal with it. By the way, this is at the heart of Christian thought. They can do all the sins they want. Who's going to make a good case for them anyway? Jesus, right in the middle, right? So this was their third problem. The first problem was, how could this world come to an end? We can't imagine that happening. The second problem was, how could all of our deeds be counted? And the third, even if all of that was true, we have plenty of entities in between us and Allah that will save us, that will shield us from that questioning. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this surah shatters all three of these myths. These three problems that they had, all three of these are attacked in this surah, Surah Az-ZILZALA. It's a very short surah, 8 ayat, very, very short surah, but contains in it profound lessons, very, very deep lessons. And the choice of the words in the surah is just absolutely incredible. So we begin with the first ayah, إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ زِلْزَالَهَا. The word that repeats itself in this ayah is زَلْزَلَ. زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ زِلْزَالَهَا. So that's a little bit of new vocabulary. The word ard is pretty simple to understand. It's come up before land, the earth, right? But the word zalzala is a new word in our vocabulary. First thing we say is that in most words in Arabic come from a 3-letter root. So this is basically what's called the jidr, the root of the word, okay, the source of the word. For example, ilm is ayn, lam, mim, 3 letters, right? But zalzala is 4 letters. Za, lam. So this is not a normal root. Usually the root letters are 3, but this is quadrilateral. Ruba'i is 4 letters. But Imam Raghib al-Asfahani and other linguists, they argue that even the 4-letter roots are rooted in a 3-letter root. They're based still on a 3-letter word, and it's their enhanced form. So he argues that zalzala actually comes from zalla. And zalla in Arabic, that's za, lam, and lam, 3 letters. This word in Arabic means to slip. When you're walking and you trip or you slip, this is called zalla. But then, when you have takrar lafzi, when the syllables are repeating, zala, the syllables are repeating, right? Takrar lafzi, it indicates takrar ma'nawi. It means because the phonetics are repeating, the meaning includes repetition. So someone who keeps tripping and slipping over and over and over again, that act is called zalzala. And of course, in some other languages, even in the Quran, in classical Arabic, zalzala means an earthquake also. But what happens in an earthquake? You keep tripping and you keep slipping and you don't have stable footing, so it's actually still rooted in zalla. So when Allah says, إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضِ, it's alluding to the fact that people won't be able to stand the way they stand normally. And they'll be shaken thoroughly and people will be slipping. Now this is captured in another ayah. Allah Azza wa Jal says, إِنَّ زَلْزَلَةَ السَّاعَةِ شَيْءٌ عَظِيمٌ. No doubt, the shaking of that hour, the zalzala of that hour, of the hour, is an enormous thing. In another place he says, وَتَرَى النَّاسَ سُكَارَى وَمَا هُمْ بِسُكَارَى. You'll see people as though they're drunk, but they're not drunk at all. What does that mean they're drunk? Have you ever seen somebody who's walking around and he's drunk? They're tripping on themselves, they can't stand up straight, they're wavering, their bodies are waving, right? That's what's going to happen when you're in an earthquake. Your body's shaking and waving like you look like you're drunk. And Allah says, وَتَرَى النَّاسَ سُكَارَى وَمَا هُمْ بِسُكَارَى. You'll assume that they're drunk, but they're not drunk at all. And that's captured in the word zulzilat in the first ayah. A rough translation I will offer you: when the earth is violently shaken repeatedly, as it was always meant to, zilzalaha, it's violent shaking. But now that's a rough translation. We're going to go bit by bit, word by word by word, and understand something more about this word. Now in the Quran, for earthquakes or for shaking, there's the word rajja. إِذَا رُجَّتِ الْأَرْضُ رَجَّا. And that's for shaking something violent, or jerking something all of a sudden. Like it was still, and it was pushed or rattled all of a sudden. That's when rajja is used, or tadjij. Then another word we find, rajaf, in the Quran. يَوْمَ تَرْجُفُ الرَّاجِفَةِ. Rajaf is a kind of movement or shaking that, you have like a sheet on a bed, and you jerk it like this, and there's waves caused, or you throw a stone in a pond and ripples come out, it disturbs the entire piece of the water, right? This is the word rajaf. This is the word Allah uses for some munafiqun. He says, al-murjifuna fil Madina. Because they were causing disturbance in the peace of Medina, so the same word is used when they cause disturbance. But the word nonetheless here in this ayah is that of zalzala. Al-Biqa'i rahimahullah comments in its relationship with the previous surah. He says, while the previous surah ended with the rewards for as-salih wa-talih fi dar al-baqa. As-salih, the righteous person, at-talih, the wretched, wicked person. both of their endings, their conclusions in the final home, in the house that will always remain. That was mentioned at the end of the last surah, in Surah Al-Bayyinah. What is he referring to? إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ وَالْمُشْرِكِينَ فِي نَارِ جَهَنَّمَ خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا أُولَٰئِكَ هُمْ شَرُّ الْبَرِيَّةِ إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمْ خَيْرُ الْبَرِيَّةِ. That was at the end of the previous surah. Where will they end up? One of them in Jahannam, fi nari Jahannam. The second one, جَزَاؤُهُمْ جَنَّاتُ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ جَنَّاتِ. Right? Or Jannatu عِنْدَ gardens at the bottoms of which rivers are going to be flowing. تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارِ. This is the conclusion of the previous surah. But this surah begins, as he comments, أَوَّلُ مُبْدِئِ تِلْكَ الدَّارِ وَأَوَائِلُ غَايَاتِهَا. What that implies is, that was the end of the journey, but Allah is talking, that was the end of the end. Allah is now talking about the beginning of the end. That's what they will end up at. But this terrible journey to the hellfire, or this awesome journey to the paradise, it begins with the day of judgment. So that's what this surah is talking about, where that journey begins. He says, فَقَالَ مُعَبِّرًا. This is an interesting comment by Al-Biqai rahimahullah. بِأَدَاةِ التَّحْقِيقِ لِأَنَّ الْأَمْرُ حَتْمٌ لَا بُدَّ مِنْ كَوْنِهِ إِذَا. He says, this word إِذَا in the beginning, إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ زِلْزَالَهَا. إِذَا is used in Arabic to remind someone of something that is going to happen that they keep forgetting. Sometimes in the word when in English, when. Is used sometimes to talk about something in the past, and sometimes it's used to talk about something in the future. For example, when I helped you last year, right? When I helped you I'm referring to it in the past. When I say when I call you next week, I'm referring to the word when in the future. When you use the word when in the past, you don't say إِذَا, you say إِذ in Arabic. The word when for the past is إِذ. The same word when for the future is إِذَا. إِذَا. So this word is إِذَا. It's referring to something in the future. But there's something more. The word إِذَا is to remind someone of something that is bound to happen. It's not if it will happen, it is when it will happen. What's the difference between if and when? If I say to somebody, if I call you, pick up. That means I may or may not call you. But when I say, when I call you, pick up, there's a difference, right? I'm definitely going to call in that case. I've made the intention, it's for sure. So by saying إِذَا, Allah Azza wa Jal made the event of the Day of Judgment a certain reality. A certain reality. He doesn't say if the earth is shaken, He says when it is shaken. When making it an absolute reality, subhanallah. Then the other thing is, وَكَانَ الْبِنَاءُ لِلْمَفْعُولِ يَدُلُّ عَلَى سُهُولَةِ الْفِعْلِ وَيُسْرِهِ جِدًّا. Allah didn't say when He will shake the earth. He said when the earth will be shaken. إِذَا زُلْزِلَتْ. This is مبني على المفعول. This is the passive form. It's kind of like the difference between, I helped and I was helped. I was helped, right? Or a car, I drove the car, or if I say a car was driven. When I say a car was driven, I didn't mention the driver. I just mentioned that something happened to the car, but I didn't mention the driver. Similarly, if I say about Allah Azza wa Jal, Allah will shake the earth. That's not what He said. He said when the earth will be shaken. He didn't mention Himself. Now this has several rhetorical benefits. But the ones I want to highlight before you is, يَدُلُّ عَلَى سُهُولَةِ الْفِعْلِ وَيُسْرِهِ جَدًّا. The passive is used in Arabic for an action that is very easy to do. Very, very easy to do. Like, it'll get done. When you say it'll get done. Now you didn't say who's going to do it. So the rhetorical difference in Arabic between I'll do it and it'll get done is I'll do it implies whatever you're doing might be difficult. When you say it'll get done, it's really easy. You don't even have to mention the fact that you'll do it, it'll just get done. It's very easy on you. So by saying Zulzilat, Allah Azza wa Jalla is mentioning how easy it is for Allah to cause that violent shaking of the earth that is bound to come. The violent earthquake of the Day of Judgment is very easy on Allah, and that is captured in the word Zulzilat al-Ard. Then we find, commenting on this, Imam Abu Ja'far ibn Zubayr's notes, he argues that the previous surah mentions Khayrul Bariyah and Sharrul Bariyah. Right? Two groups, actually in the reverse order. Sharrul Bariyah and Khayrul Bariyah. And those were the two groups, the best and the worst of all creation, of all things that exist. In this surah, inshaAllah ta'ala, we're going to find, Allah Azza wa Jal says, يَوْمَ إِذٍ يَصْدُرُ النَّاسُ أَشْتَاتًا. On the day on which people will be divided up into groups, and Abu Ja'far comments that comment that Allah made in the previous surah is now being fulfilled in this surah. There Allah just said two groups. But how did they end up becoming two groups? How are they going to be separated into two distinct groups? Because if you look at the life of this world, the believers and the kuffar were living in the same city. They were even neighbors to each other, family to each other, inseparable even in some cases, right? But now we're going to look at a case where they're going to be separated. Zak, if you could just do me a favor and turn the phone off, it would really help, inshallah. Thanks. Alright. Train of thought sort of thing. Anyway. So, Sharrul Bariyah and Khayrul Bariyah. Now, Imam al-Alusi in commenting on إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ زِلْزَالَهَا, he says, أي حركت تحريكا عنيفا متداركا rather and متكررا. He says it's going to be a kind of movement that is given to it that is violent, that is continuous, that keeps repeating itself, and it doesn't come to an end. And we'll talk about why he comes to this conclusion about it. It's actually embedded in the language. In Arabic, you have this concept of something called maf'ul mutlaq. For example, in Arabic you say ضربته ضربا. ضربته means I hit him. I hit him. ضربته ضربا would, if you want to translate it absolutely literally, it would mean I hit him with a hit. Which is kind of repeating yourself, right? I hit him with a hit. It doesn't make sense because obviously when you hit him with a hit. But in Arabic, when you repeat the word, you're saying I hit him really, really hard. I gave him a real beating. That's how you say it in Arabic. ضربته ضربا. So this maf'ul mutlaq, this repetition of the word, what it does is it says, it wasn't just any beating, I really beat the life out of this guy. ضربا. Similarly, if I say, قَتَّلَهُ تَقْتِيلًا. قَتَّلَ, he slaughtered him. He violently killed him. تَقْتِيلًا, in the worst possible fashion. In the worst possible fashion. If I say, نَصَرَنَ اللَّهُ نَصْرًا, Allah helped us, and then I add the word nasr again. Maf'ul mutlaq. This is called maf'ul mutlaq. It means Allah gave us incredible help. This is enormous help. So we have إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ زِلْزَالَهَا. You have the repeated word. This one understanding of that is maf'ul mutlaq. So this is an incredible kind of earthquake. Earthquakes by themselves are incredible. They're not something normal. They're not something you experience every day. So when they happen, they're an enormous event. But Allah goes out of His way to take something that's already incredible and says it's going to be much more than even you can imagine now. By adding the word, zilzalaha. But grammatically speaking, we don't expect the word zilzalaha, we expect the word zilzalan. From a grammatical point of view, إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ زِلْزَالًا. And that's maf'ul mutlaq. But Allah didn't say zilzalan, He said zilzalaha. The ha is a pronoun, it's idafa, it's connected to the noun, and it refers back to the earth. The earth is feminine, and the ha is referring back to the earth. So we're going to look at the benefit of Allah saying instead of zilzalan, saying zilzalaha. What difference does it make? And what rhetorical benefits does it produce? And how profoundly deep the meaning of the ayah gets because of that word. So the first impression we get is from Imam al-Alusi rahimahullah in Ruh al-Ma'ani. He says, فَكَأَنَّمَا سِوَاهُ لَيْسَ زِلْزَالًا بِالنِّسْبَةِ إِلَيْهِ. That's the first thing. Because of zilzalaha, it is an earthquake, such a quake that no other quake can ever be compared to it. By saying this is its special quake. This is something that's never happened before. Now, an earthquake, obviously we know that earthquakes happened before. But by adding the ha, it becomes incomparable to any other event such as it that has occurred before. That's the first thing. وَزِلْزَالَهَا الْعَجِيبَ الَّذِي يُقَادِرُ قَدْرَهُ. He says, يُقَادَرُ قَدْرُهُ actually. He says this is going to be a unique earthquake which can't even be imagined. It's beyond imagination. It's a unique kind of earthquake, and that's captured in the pronoun ha. أَوْ عُنِيَ بِذَلِكَ الْعَهْدُ أَيْضًا, he says. This is awesome. He says, or the meaning embedded in the ha in zilzalaha could be the promise. If I say, for example, he fulfilled a promise, that's one thing. He fulfilled His promise. His promise. Like Allah says, its earthquake. He doesn't just say an earthquake, He says, its earthquake. What it implies is the earth has made a promise to Allah that it will shake on that day, and it's fulfilling that promise. SubhanAllah. And that's captured in the ha, in zilzalaha. So it could be al-ahd aydan. Then he says, he goes on to say, about this idafa, this is Zamakhshari now, in Al-Kashaf. He says that this implies that in Allah's wisdom and will, it was always meant to shake. By adding the ha, what we're learning is, this was the earth's destiny. This was its end goal. When Allah created it, it knew and Allah knew that its final goal, the purpose for which it was created is to shake one day. Is to come to an end one day. And it's like it's been waiting to fulfill its mission all this time. And finally it gets to do the very thing it was created to do. The earth was not created for people to enjoy and walk around and think that it's going to last forever. Its real purpose is in its nihaya, it's at the end. The purpose of something is not in the journey, it's at the end of the journey. Right? The destination is the purpose. So the destination of this earth is the Day of Judgment. And that's captured in ha. That it gets to fulfill its destiny. And the thing that it was always meant to do, it finally gets around to it. And then finally, هو الزلزال الشديد الذي ليس بعده ونحوه نحو قولك أكرم التقي إكرامه. That's what he's saying. He's saying that this is an intense earthquake, the likes of which will never occur after it. In other words, you can't have any worse. First of all, nothing's like it been done before. But what's being argued is, it is at the nth. It can't shake any more than Allah is going to shake it on that day. It doesn't have the ability to become any more violent than Allah will already make it on that day. That's also embedded in the ha. Like for example, in the Arabic expression, أَكْرَمَ التَّقِيَّ إِكْرَامَهُ, what that means is, he honored that righteous person as much as possible. In other words, he couldn't honor him anymore. He got the nth degree of honor by that person. This is ikramahu, that pronoun idafa at the end. So similarly, zilzalaha, implying Allah will shake it in a way that this earth has no more ability to shake than that. It's been exhausted to its capacity. It's going to be the worst earthquake ever, and no earthquake could be more violent after. That's not even possible. Even that's not possible. Then أَوْ زِلْزَالَهَا كُلُّهُ وَجَمِيعُ مَا هُوَ مُمْكِنُ مِنْهُ. This one of it we already covered, but the other half we didn't. The meaning being, when Allah says its earthquake, it implies that there will be no patch, no inch left on the earth that won't shake. You know, when an earthquake happens nowadays, some of the earth shakes, but the other part of the earth is still calm. You don't feel it. You can hear some place at a 4.0 or a 6.0 or a 7.0. But on the other side of the earth, nothing. But zilzalaha, by using the ha, Allah referred to the entire earth. There will not be a place left that is not feeling the wrath of this most violent earthquake, which cannot go any higher on the Richter scale. It can't get any worse. Subhanallah. Ash-Shinqiti rahimahullah. Al-Awwal, the first comment he makes, Ash-Shinqiti in Tafseer of the first ayah, he says, تَكْرَارُ الْحُرُوفِ أو ما يقال تكرار المقطع الواحد. He says the repetition of the huruf, it implies that it will shake, stop, it'll keep doing that. And this is the same for all words that have these quadrilateral roots, al-ruba'i, waswasa, alladhi yuwaswisu fi sudur al-nas. Same two syllables, right? Zalzala, waswasa, damdama alayhim rabbuhum birabbihim. These kinds of words have an act that goes and stops, and goes and stops. So when it stops for a little while, what do you start thinking? Relief. And it goes again, and then it stops, and it goes again. This is what shaitan does. He makes waswasa. Hamasa is to whisper. Allah didn't just say whisper, He said waswasa, which means He comes, and when you look back, He's gone again. Then you go forward, He comes again, whispers again, goes back, whispers again. He does the repeated act. And that's what's implied in the word zalzala, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then, so now this repetition that Allah is referring to in the word zalzala comes up in many places in the Quran. For example, He says, وَحُمِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ وَالْجِبَالُ فَدُكَّتَا دَكَّةً وَاحِدًا إِذَا رُجَّتِ الْأَرْضُ رَجًّا وَبُسَّتِ الْجِبَالُ بَسًّا. And He says, يَوْمَ تَرْجُفُ الرَّاجِفَةِ تَتْبَعُهَا الرَّادِفَةِ. All these ayat are referring to something that will happen repeatedly. And this is something that is meant to happen on the Day of Judgment. On a side note, before I continue, Allah Azza wa Jalla says about the Day of Judgment, for the believers, He says, لَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. Right? And it's not commonly understood what that means.